Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Gilstrap Trustees meeting. Just a reminder that this meeting is being live streamed, so everybody knows that's happening. And could I just remind you that if you're not speaking, to be on mute to stop any background noise, because it does help with the meeting. Okay, so we move to the agenda. Agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. I think everybody's present, so there's no apologies. Agenda item number 2, declarations of interest from members and officers. Anybody got any? No? Okay. Agenda item number 3, declaration of intention to record the meeting. Of course, the council is recording it. Is anybody else recording the meeting? Thank you. So we move to agenda item number 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of October. Is everybody okay with those minutes? Could I have a proposer and a seconder, please?
I'm happy to propose, Chairman.
Thank you,
I'll
Matthew.
second.
Thank you, Keith. All in favour? Perfect. Thank you very much. So we now move to agenda item number 5, land of Cedar Avenue, Lincoln Road, Newark update. And I think, David, you've signalled you want to come in, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. If I may, and it's by no means to curtail, stymie or railroad the debate, really. It's just, Madam Chairman, it occurs to me there's a lot of detail here in this report that pretty much brings us up to date with where we are. And the recommendation as is, it invites that debate. And I suppose really it's to share with you, Chairman, that I have an anxiety, is how I'll put it, rather than a concern, that we might need to structure that. And by that I mean that I think there's a series of sequential decisions. Is it housing land? If it's not, what is it? If it's that, is it the trust? If it's something else, then how do we proceed? And if we don't take it in that sequential manner, I imagine we're going to start wrestling jelly. And if you wish it now or later, Madam Chairman, to that extent, I have a proposition.
Yeah, if you'd like to carry on.
Okay, thank you. If committee would indulge me. So it is a proposal, albeit a non-voting member, and it does mirror that sequential process. So part 1, if I put it that way, and sorry, Helen, good luck with the minutes. Part 1, it's clear from the report that the trust quite properly sought to get full financial yield from the land, because even the original bequest was that the land was there to support the trust, and that is in terms of income. It's having been allocated for housing, several dibs now. It looks to me, so in my view, that if you like, the private sector didn't come forward. The developer that did was effectively a social housing company, and they themselves, if people aren't aware, receive grants from government and others to support their business. So one might argue it was a subsidised bid, and they, through various attempts, have walked away now, if I can put it that way, which to me, looking at the various planning applications, suggests the land will not be viable for housing development as we had hoped. And I wouldn't be convinced that going back to the market again would progress that any further. Recommendation 1 of my proposition then is that the trust deallocate it as housing land, having exhausted or having undertaken that proper market activity. That then, and here's where the sequential element hopefully becomes obvious, would mean that it's no longer housing, which puts the different value on which we have in the report. It is therefore, whether you want to call it public space or open space, with a value that could be realised as capital. And 2 further considerations arise. The first is therefore, would the trust operate it as open space itself? And the second consideration is that financial responsibility on us as trustees. My own view, the trust isn't here to operate open space, but I think that's academic. The second element is, sadly, through let us call them incursions of late, that land is causing a revenue cost to the trust. So as a trustee, my consideration is that in the financial interests of the trust, we're holding a land that costs money and returns nothing by way of investment. To lease it as open space would yield nothing or little. My second recommendation then, Chairman, is to go to the market in a way, I'll fashion that. Sorry, my second recommendation, therefore, is that we formalise it is public open space. The third recommendation is that the trust do not consider the provision of this open space to be its core business. And my fourth is that in realising there is that financial strain, the trust resolve to approach both the district and the town councils to see if they would acquire the land as open space to be protected. And just so I'm clear there, so nobody thinks I'm trying to do a clever or a wriggle, if I said protected open space, we would determine how to do that. Could be covenant, there's various different ways of doing it. I think it's more proper if one is selling to somebody to negotiate how it is protected and for it to come back to us for us to be satisfied that it is. And that might not just be covenants, that might also be to give ourselves proper protection that whoever bought it in future, if they suddenly put 10 houses on it, we can either object or get a share of that should that occur. So why do I say districts and town councils, Madam Chairman, specifically? Because I think once you've decided it's open space, it ain't going to yield a return to anyone, including ourselves. And therefore, very few people will come forward. Councils, a benefactor we've never heard of, or potentially, and in respect to the group that have contacted us, a community group or charity, but they would have to raise the money to purchase it and to sustain the yield, the revenue costs going forward, which is quite a burden. I personally strongly believe it should be the councils. Indeed, my preference is the town council. And I suppose at this point, to remind the clerk and the minute taker, I am a district and a town councillor, and I think we've all got it in our interest, so that is recorded. And I say that because if councils aren't there to provide community space, I'm not sure what their key role is, but in the vast majority of areas, it would be the parish council. And we, because we are also councillors, know by virtue of the devolution agreement that with the exception of the sconce, the majority of public community space in Newark Town is operated by the Newark Town Council. Why would you have one place as an anomaly? Now, further to that, when Mr. Gilstrap set up the trust and allocated things, he very deliberately tithed it to councils. I forget the quote, David Payne as was. He said at the time that retained a connection to people that must interrelate, if you like, with the public. So whatever the trust does will always have that link. But if a council acquires it, the conversations we've had whereupon we're tethered as trustees are had as councillors. You know, Jill and Irene, you're there as the ward councillor, not a councillor that has this hat on where we consider things through the lens of the trust. And I just think that respects Mr. Gilstrap better, the public better. And if it is in either council's control, that land would be at least to the same standard as all the other community space in Newark Town. But just to polish off, Madam Chairman, it's not by way of recommendation, therefore. I know there are community groups with an interest. If either council acquired it, it doesn't stop them having an interest. It doesn't stop them coming forward. It might mean they could organise as a friends group instead, not have to raise the 45,000 and the revenue costs, but support in drawing down different grants and helping to shape what it looks like. So I just want to be clear, Madam Chairman, none of this is to mitigate that community group. In fact, my own view is if it is in a council domain that by its own nature is more political and accountable to the public, which a trust isn't, it better enables ward councillors and all of us, if we're on whichever council, to receive, consider, reflect and respond in the manner in which we have been elected, which here we cannot and do not quite properly. Those are my recommendations, Madam Chairman. I believe we might need the advice of the clerk to the trust, but I believe they would satisfy the necessary tests of the objectives of the charity, the full and proper consideration of what the land can be used for to apply to charitable purposes, and the necessary consideration as to why we're doing what we're doing. And whilst we can't do it in detail, one of the exempt reports indeed indicates from the land agent how one might sell open space and what covenant strike restrictions we might seek. That, Madam Chairman, suggests to me that consideration has been undertaken on our behalf and therefore it is entirely possible. So moved.
Sorry, Rita, Chairman, I've muted you because of the background noise whilst Councillor Lloyd was speaking. Apologies.
I didn't see that. I'll let you go. Jill, you wanted to come in?
I did, Chairman. Thank you very much indeed. Well, you can imagine how both Irene and I are feeling at the moment. Well, I'm speaking on behalf of Irene. It's the most sensible sort of start of conclusions that it would have been nice if we could have done a long time ago. We did actually loosely talk about the town council purchasing that field some time ago, but it wasn't the right time to do it because it was going to be sold for housing. David Lloyd is absolutely right. If we followed his suggestions, it would be a win-win situation for everybody. I would like to suggest, if I may, as an observer, that you trustees would consider...
Jill, you are a trustee.
Oh, I thought I was just an observer.
No, you are a trustee.
Yeah, that's right, with no voting right, that's right. In that case, following on from David, I would like to formally suggest, with the appropriate legal team and everything, that we approach the town council and the district council to prove that we might sell it to the town council and then liaise with the community group afterwards. And I think that would be an absolutely stunning suggestion. David's absolutely right. It would be a tragedy if this land went for housing. It is the very last piece of green space on the bridge ward, and youngsters would have to travel. Sorry about the dog, she can't help it. They'd have to travel either up to the Riverside Park, the Castle Grounds, Clay Lane, and I don't think any of us would want our young children to be doing that sort of journey on their own these days. So I thank David Lloyd for that and leave that suggestion with you. Thank you.
Were you seconding that, Jill?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
thank you for that.
Thank you.
Rob, you wanted to come in?
Yes, thank you. Obviously, I'll take advice, Karen, but is that not jumping the gun a bit? Don't we need to go further down the legal lines before we think of transferring it to any council? Or can we just, we can't just do it, surely?
Chairman, shall I come in there?
Yes, please.
I think, Councillor Crowe, in terms of what's been proposed by Councillor Lloyd, I think there is a logic and a rationale that fits with the trust's objects in terms of getting to the point of concluding that the trust would very much like to see the land retained as open space rather than disposed of for housing development. Clearly, there are some there's some advice that the trustee board would need to seek from its valuer on those options. We have already sought some advice, but now that the proposals on the table are giving a clearer steer about what the trustee board feels is in the best interest of the trust and the beneficiaries of the trust, that gives a little bit more meat to go to our external valuers for advice on. So you will need to seek that external valuation advice. I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Crowe, about the trust needing to make sure that it doesn't just target one potential owner. I think it would be best to keep within the terms of the original proposal and seek interest from different public bodies, and clearly in Newark those interested public bodies may well be the town council and may well be the district council. So I think it would be best to keep it broad and see what response you get from those two bodies. And I know it sounds a little bit artificial, because the district council is the trustee of the trust, but the trustee board and what you're looking at tonight is very much looking at the district council's role as a trustee and not as a district council with all its other functions. So I don't know whether that answers your question, Councillor Crowe.
Yes, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to put your phone on mute, please? Thank you. Keith?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just need a bit of clarification on things. I think you sort of covered it slightly there, Karen, about the putting it up for sale, and it can't just be to one, because that, you know, it's a lot of money, and therefore, so there is therefore the risk somebody come along, say, I don't know, Keith Girling, who's got a couple of £100,000 to spare, and says, I'll pay the £45,000. And yes, I want it as open space. Yeah. So what sort of what things would we put in place, or are there things we can put in place to make sure, no matter who has it, so if it's Keith Girling with his £45,000, or the town council or wherever, that we can ensure that it doesn't get used for anything else? Because obviously, you know, it's that would be to us if some. For example, Keith Girling with his £45,000 bought it, then 10 years down the line built 15, 20 houses on it and made a lot of money. You know, and I wouldn't want that to happen. Well, if I was Keith Girling, I might, but if I was a developer, I might want to do that. So all the things we can put in place for that. The other thing that worries me slightly, I think the proposal is a good proposal, and I just need some reassurances really, is we've gone from £610,000 value down to £45,000 value ish, whatever it's going to be, yeah, in a very short period of time. In a very short period of time. And so are we as trustees, whose responsibility it is to look after the trust, going to be held could be sort of criticised for such a large reduction in costs within a short period of time? Because let's face it, we've had that land now for over hundreds of years, and then all of a sudden we're selling it quick because and the value is £45,000. So I'm just worried about that not in terms of doing it. So I'll be very clear on that. I'm not concerned of so much doing it. I'm just more concerned is if it got to the Charity Commission or something like that, would we as trustees, the voting trustees, be held responsible and liable for it?
Chairman, can I answer those two questions? Okay. So in terms of the first question from Councillor Girling, what sort of restrictions? And there are a range of restrictions that that you could apply as the owner of the land, and they range from covenants requiring the land to be used for a particular purpose, and if in the scenario that you suggested, if at a later date there was to be a change of use, and there was the new owners were to look at developing the land for residential purposes, there's clearly an uplift in value that would result from that. And what you would normally put on any transfer is a clawback, which sort of brings back a percentage of that uplift in value back to the vendor, the trust, who would be selling the land. I think that the thing is as well to point out, so there are lots of legal restrictions that can be placed on the land to ensure that it's used for the purpose that the trust feels that it should be used for, in terms of open space, if that's where the trust decision is going to come out. I think the other thing to highlight is that I think there's no suggestion that there would be a quick sale, because there are processes that, if the trustee board decides that this is to support this proposal, then there are quite a lot of processes to go through, not least finding whether there is an appropriate purchaser, and to take up your point about, well, anyone could come forward with the money, saying that they want to purchase it and keep it as an open space. I think it's for the trust, if the trustee board decides that this is the best long-term use of the land, and to secure that would be the best way would be to dispose of it, then it's absolutely appropriate for the trust to decide who is the best purchaser with that end purpose in mind. So I would suggest that your sort of scenario would not be one that the trustee board would go for. You know, you would be looking for who would be the best purchaser to secure that long-term aim of keeping the land as open space. And, you know, that inevitably might lead you to a public body, like the district council or the town council. The other issue in terms that you've raised about the liabilities of the trustees, the council as a trustee, you're absolutely right. The value of this land has been vastly changed in the last year and a half, from its original anticipated value at 610,000. Now that came down because the Notts Community Housing Association, their tender, if you like, was predicated on a number of units on the land that planning would not support. So when Notts Community Housing revised their planning proposals, they also, if you recall, they revised down their tender quite significantly. But you're right, there is a big difference between what the value of the land is as residential development, as opposed to what the value is as open space. So I think it would be very advisable to go to the valuer when you've made a decision about what proposal you wish to support, just to make sure that the trustees' obligations are satisfied and you're acting in a proper way. And then it may be, depending on which body comes forward, that you want to support as the proposed purchaser of the land. If we can get that far, it might be advisable for us to check with the Charity Commission that there are no issues, just to protect the the council in its role as trustee, to make sure that you're not going out with your obligations. So it won't be a quick process, and we'll make sure that all of those protections are in place for you.
Yeah, if I could just come back, Rich, I meant quick sale in the fact that we've had it hundreds of years, then all of a sudden in a space of a year we're trying to sell it twice. So it was more than that. I am a lot more content if we can put the those legal restrictions in to ensure that it is always used for what we intend it to be used. Absolutely. So I'll be more content with that. And the fact that we check with the Charity Commission to make sure, as trustees, that we have done the right thing. Because the last thing I want to do is have the Charity Commission coming after me because they feel that we've been inappropriate in terms of the quite substantial reduction in the value of the land. So I'm content with it, provided they have those reassurances. Thanks, Chairman.
Thanks, Kelly. Did you want to come back in, Jill?
Yeah, I understand your concerns, Keith, and I'm sure it's something everybody realises would have to a process that would have to start from the very beginning. And Karen, yes, it won't be a quick process at all, and things have got to be right. But nothing would change my mind from seconding David's proposal, and leaving it in your very capable hands.
Thank you, Jill. Lawrence?
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman. As you probably appreciate, the Gilstrap Charity Children's Wood and Wildlife Meadow are probably listening to what we have to say. I'm just sorry they haven't been having a chance to speak, actually. Hopefully they will be given a chance to speak about their proposal in the future. I just, as you know, they are listening to hear what we're going to say. This has been dragging on for quite a lot of years now. So William Gilstrap gave the land as open space. I would like to see the Wildlife Trust Committee given a chance to give their opinions, what they would like to propose. Are they going to raise any funding towards their future? So I'm just, as you can imagine, this has been going on for a long time. I just want to make sure they get an opportunity to give the people a chance to speak for the development of the future of the land. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Lawrence. As you know, there's not a lot we can do at the moment with the group until we've actually decided on this bit of land as to what we actually want to do with it. Jill and Keith wanted to come back in. Jill?
I was leaning on the table, bone idle. I wasn't indicating to speak.
Thanks, Rita. I just want to correct something that Councillor Goff said, because he keeps saying it, and no matter how many times we tell him he's not right, he keeps repeating it, and it's typical that he thinks if you keep saying it, it becomes true. It was not given by Mr. Gilstrap to the trust as open space. Yeah, it was given as a piece of land. Those houses that are around there weren't even there at the time. It was given as a piece of land so that the trust could sell it in the future to keep the trust going. So let's get rid of that myth. It's not been given us as open space land. We, as trustees, are looking to see if we can facilitate that, but it was not given by the Gilstrap family as an open space piece of land. So stop saying it, Lawrence. It's not true.
Chairman, you're on mute.
Sorry, I thought I'd taken that off. Irene, did you want to speak at all? I can't, you're on mute.
Sorry, carry on.
No, thank David Lloyd for the way he's come up with it. Let's hope the trustees will vote and carry it forward for the best interest of the trustees.
Yeah.
Thank you, Irene. Matthew? Matthew, can't hear you.
I'll take this headset off. Is that better?
That's better.
Better, yeah. I think it's a very sensible proposal that's come up this evening. As the clerk says, this is obviously going to take a period of time if this were to go ahead. My concern is that it's not documented in the report at any point, but in terms of what our potential liabilities would be if any further encampments or anything else that were to happen on the land. Of course, I've because of lockdown, I've not been down there for many weeks, if not months. So I'm not sure how secure the land is at the moment and what our liabilities are in that short term. That's my concern.
Thank you. I think Karen can sort of confirm this, but I do know after the last encampment, I think some work was done on the perimeter. Was it, Karen?
Chairman, we certainly started to consider how we might future-proof the land. It is difficult because there is quite a hefty gate, at the access, and of course the last unauthorised encampment removed it sort of and put it to one side. Now that's been replaced, obviously, but I think that the short answer to Councillor Skinner's question is that clearly, as the landowner, we the trust continues to have the liability for any costs of any unlawful encampments, and that will continue. There's a limit to what you can do to future-proof a piece of land where you want to be able to facilitate public access to it. And you've got to also have access to maintain it. But just to explain as well, when we have unlawful incursions on the land, the district council does share the cost of the cleanup afterwards with the trust, and that comes from the arrangement that is sort of quite historic, that because the trust allowed the district council to place a multi-use games, the mugger on the land, and there is no payment as such for that. The district council covers the whole maintenance cost at the moment in recognition of being able to have that mugger on the site. So the costs of the unlawful incursions have been shared 50-50 between the district council and the trust.
Thank you for that, Karen. Is there anybody else wishing to speak? Lawrence, you wanted to come back?
Well, I don't know where the documentation is for when Sir William Gilstrap gave this land.
Lawrence, can I interrupt you? I'm sorry, but you're going back on old ground.
No, but the idea is I don't know where all the facts are that somebody says it's not open space or it's not for this purpose or that purpose.
No disrespect, Lawrence, but you've had the paperwork, and Karen did some training last week and explained it all to us. But you're just going back now on open ground, and I'm not prepared to keep discussing it because we're just going round in circles. We've had a proposal and we've got a seconder. So I'm now going to go to the vote of the voting members. So could I have a show of hand of the 5 voting members, please? Are you voting, Lawrence?
No, I'm not voting, no. Because I just feel Gilstrap, history of Mr. Gilstrap has not been, we haven't got the real facts to put together what his proposal.
That's all right, Chairman, is against.
That's 4-4. So are you voting against or are you abstaining?
I'm voting against.
Thank you. So that's 4-4 and 4 against. Helen, I presume you've managed to get something down as the long proposal.
I have, yes, Chairman.
Thank you. Karen, is that okay with you? Everything's okay with you on that?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And so by my understanding, we've got 5 recommendations, and I took copious notes whilst Councillor Lloyd was formulating those, and I'm sure Helen has as well. But it culminates with us approaching the district and the town councils to see whether they would be interested in acquiring the land as protected open space. So that follows that once we've done that investigation with those 2 bodies, we'll come back to the trustee board so that you can make further decisions on that. But I think what I will also do is consult with the trust's valuer to get valuation advice on that as well for you.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, so we can now then move to agenda item 6, which is the grants awarded update. And did you say that Helen's coming in on this one? Thank you.
I am, Chairman, yes. Yes, it's just to update the trustees on the grants awarded at the last meeting in October. The report is pretty self-explanatory. Newark Civic Trust did consider the proposals that we put forward, which are reflected in the report, but they chose not to follow those and accepted half of the grant. Newark Book Festival, we went back to them and asked them to provide further information, but we've heard nothing from them since. And in relation to the cricket club, when the trustees decided or agreed that they would fund support the additional funding request for the accessibility issues, we've written to them and let them know as well, but to date they haven't drawn down any of that additional funding. In fact, as the report reflects, they've only drawn down £5,000 out of the entire award to them. So that's where we stand at the moment. It's just for the trustees to be updated on those.
Thank you, Helen. I was surprised at the Newark Civic Trust. I thought they might go for what was suggested, but it's their choice. And I think the cricket club might start to come forward a little bit, once the weather starts improving. I know they've been flooded recently, so I'd expect that to come through soon. Any comments from anybody? Because this report is for noting. No? So everybody's okay with that? Keith, are you trying to speak? Keith, are you speaking?
Sorry, Rita, I was trying pressing buttons and no hand was coming up, and we're on the grants, aren't we? So I just think that the civic trust grant for the trails around the town are really well received, and I think I don't just want to wave it through, because I think there's a lot of hard work that's gone into it, and you know, and I remember last time actually we suggested maybe him compiling a booklet rather than just a leaflet, and I don't know where we've got with that. Was that suggested to them? You know, was it received well by them? You know, so just
it's in the report.
Oh yeah, well yeah, it's in the report, but okay, yeah.
They didn't want it.
Sorry, yeah, okay, but I just wanted it because they do work hard on it, and I just don't want it to be waved through.
Yeah, no, it was explained to them, but they didn't want it, so they declined. They declined the extra and went for the lower.
That's fair enough, but you know, it's still praising the work that they do.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, is everybody okay with that? Yeah. If so, then that actually concludes the meeting. Thanks everybody for your attendance. Thanks, Karen. Bye.
Thank you, Chairman.
Very much, Chairman. Bye bye.